You would think that a looming recession, spurred largely by exorbitant government spending, would give this Congress pause. But instead of taking a minute to consider what a responsible federal government budget looks like, we are instead placed behind the barrel of a gun, forcing us to choose between letting government expire or blindly passing a $1.7 trillion spending package that not only does not balance, but in fact spends over 10% more than last year. How does Congress spend taxpayers' money? Well, here's just a few examples of how your government currently spends money. We found that they spent last year $2.3 million injecting beagles with cocaine. It seems that they were curious, their researchers were curious, despite the pain they inflicted on these dogs, they were curious to know if cocaine causes adverse effects. Guess what? Read the newspaper. Read the news. Look at the addicts across our country. You think you need to inject beagles with cocaine to know that cocaine's a bad deal? $700,000 was spent to study how male parrots attract their mate. Really? We've got people who go hungry in our country. We got people that are trying to get out from behind poverty, and we're spending $700,000 studying how male parrots attract a female. We spent $187,000 to study whether or not dogs help kids cope. Of course they do. Ask any pet owner. Any pet owner could have told you, and we would have saved the taxpayer $187,000. We spent $118,000 to study if a metal replica, a robot of Marvel Comics' evil warlord Thanos, could snap his fingers. $118,000, really. They apparently hired some dude to wear metal gloves and then try to snap his fingers. You know what? They found out that it's impossible to make a snapping sound with metal fingers. So robots of the world, be warned, it's hard to snap your fingers.
Oh, that clip never gets old. I love that one. Rand Paul going down the stats of your government in action, telling you exactly how your money is spent. So I hope you guys are, really proud of your government in action, because, man, that's been keeping me up at night. I don't know about you, but, geez, I've been worried like hell. Can Thanos really snap his fingers and with the Infinity Gauntlet? Turns out he can't. But, hey, Marvel rules for the world there aren't exactly, I don't know. It doesn't seem very realistic to me already, but the metal fingers just, that one was a real doozy. Anyway, what's going on, everybody? Welcome. Thank you for being here. Man, all I can say is what a crazy ass week, right? Man, my God. Gone over all kinds of picks from Trump for his cabinet, and of course all the reactions going nuts, basically at every single pick, no matter how logical it may seem. Based on the idea that this is exactly what he said. He was going to be looking for people this time around that weren't going to screw him over like this last one did. I remember seeing John Bolton coming out and criticizing some of his choices, like, yeah, gee, I wonder why. Maybe because he picked you and you basically did exactly what you were going to do. Hey, how's it going, man? Good to see you again. I'm doing well today, a little bit tired. Sorry, by the way. I just, I noticed this when I was doing my setup. I didn't get into a fight or anything. I was putting something metal together last night, and it was a hinge, and it kept falling over, and luckily it just grazed me, but yeah, it still kind of sucks. So yeah, I didn't get no one took a swipe at me or anything. It's just a little construction mishap. But anyway, yeah, that's just looking better than I have on some episodes anyway. So yeah, thank you very much. But anyway, oh, nice. Yeah, hell yeah, man. Good stuff. I picked up Dragon Quest 3 yesterday, which is, by the way, that's a sweet-ass game, by the way. Anyway, geez. So, yeah, since it's been such a ridiculous week, all kinds of crazy stuff going on, especially yesterday, I got a little worked up, and it's yeah, I just decided, you know what, today, number one, sorry I'm late. I actually, this was based on nothing but me oversleeping, being extra tired today, I guess. So yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, this is well, anyway, sorry about it. Let's get back to the subject. Since this week has been so crazy, I figured we end on a little bit of a more optimistic sort of note today, because there's been nothing but hectic news and crazy news, and a lot of freaking out, a lot of crazy stuff, and definitely some positives. Well, a lot of positives, but everybody kind of wondering where this is all going to be going, and it's certainly, like, the rhetoric is not going to help when it comes to if anybody's concerned about people that might be thinking of taking extreme action of some kind. I don't know, maybe attempting to shoot a president-elect and assassinate them. Yeah, I'm sure the sort of rhetoric on a lot of the shows that are on mainstream television are not helping, which is why a lot of them have been announcing. Well, CNN's ratings are just in the toilet now. After the election, it was very apparent that CNN's not going to be getting a massive audience, even if they get back what they had. It was already looking bad, but and MSNBC, on the other hand, is they're not doing terrible, but they are recognizing how people are kind of just getting tired of listening to nothing but messages about how the end of the world is coming, and the end of the world is upon us, and we're all going to die, and we're all going to be sent to camps, and Trump's going to be the next Hitler, and all the other stuff. In particular, The View, everyone's favorite show, is now apparently looking for a new MAGA-aligned host, and I'm just sitting there going, yeah, that... Whew. First of all, the last time you even had a real conservative on the show, like Meghan McCain, she ended up leaving while having nervous breakdowns, having severe anxiety and depression. Basically, they ran her out feeling like crap, and she came and talked about that years later. But if they try to get someone that's not just conservative, but actually agrees with Trump on the show, well, they're going to need at least two, because they're going to need someone to be there to at least console the other one when they go off on their tears about. Not to mention the fact the whole audience is going to be against them as well, because their audience seems to be brain dead and just oh yeah, they said Trump bad, clap 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 clap, yay. So. I don't know if that's going to help much, but hey, at least they're recognizing that that having an entire panel that is just after that Eric Adams clip that I put on yesterday, that's probably one of the signs that you got a little. This guy is as blue as most governors, or not governors, mayors have been in New York, and so it's not really exactly the most, obvious Trump-supporting right-winger that you would imagine, but someone who's at least trying to do right by his citizens, and his citizens right now are tired of dealing with literally every single every single accommodation in the city that goes out to those who are needy going to someone who shouldn't be in the country in the first place. And on top of that, you have the trial with Jose Ibarra. Yeah, Jose Ibarra, who allegedly, I have to say, but murdered Laken Riley, and that is becoming a lot of graphic details. It's not pretty, but it's a reminder once again that hey, that border that we've been talking about for a long time now that needs some sort of better protection on it. Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea right about now, don't you think? So anyway, there's just been a lot of the gaslighting and a lot of the discussion that has been relied on by the media for riling up normal people, at least, is not working. The only thing they're doing, I'm sure, is getting the people that are already insane lunatics to become more insane lunatics. So, yeah, it's probably not the best idea, but hopefully they recognize that before everything goes completely off the edge. But we'll see. But in any case, like I said, we'll get to this. We'll get out of this right now. I want to start talking about something a little bit more hopeful, because that Rand Paul clip at the beginning was kind of the intro point that I was going to mainly discuss, because so I had lunch with my grandmother yesterday. We do this every week. Usually we go just because she tries to make sure that she can still get around. She's had so many surgeries over the years. It's hard for her to get out of the house very easily and go to do something. She tries to avoid it a lot, but whenever she has a chance to go, if it's something like with me or my mom or something, it's a family getting together to go have a meal or something, she really enjoys getting out to do that, and I've stuck to it because it's also good for me to get out of the house for sure. But we were having a discussion, and I know she's still been voting Democrat, and there's a family member that she just recently got in contact with that she hadn't seen or talked to in years, and they've been talking a lot, and he's got the same political view, but he's got sort of a similar interest in audio equipment and sort of like things like recording equipment, studio equipment, audio engineering, and that sort of thing, and computer technology as well. So yeah, he's got all the same interests basically that I do, minus the video games, I'm sure, but that's a different one. But he's been kind of able to, like, now he still is interested in checking out the show, and I'm like, oh boy, oh man, can't we get into something that's a little bit more away from the direct, like, it's specifically like Trump stuff, although he's not at all conservative, but it's specifically Trump stuff, just like most people were. And I realized yesterday, and it came up during the discussion, because what are the things that entrenched leftists, especially when they're older, that when you get into your senior years, what is it that is got so many people in that demographic still clinging to the left? And I kind of figured what it was for a while, but I basically confirmed that for myself yesterday when we discussed this, and I just thought it was because for the first time after discussing this specifically, I got a response that was not just completely doubtful and not just entirely dismissive and not believing, because it's hopeful to think that this will be the case. Trump has made this a promise, one of several when it comes to his tax policy. And there's no reason to think he won't, because this was one thing that the left was very upset about, because once Trump got elected, it was pretty much assured that his tax policy was going to continue, essentially continuing to, as they call it, tax benefits for the rich, which it's actually, no, that's wrong. It's tax benefits for everybody, because everybody was making more money under his administration, and that was just because of the fact that there's an interesting chart that I remember I saw brought up in Congress at one point that showed what would be, I guess, tax receipts for the United States for the last, going back to the 70s, I think even it went, where it might have even gone farther back than that. I mean, it might have gone back to like World War II era. But anyway, the point is that going back, like almost 100 years even, what we've seen from our tax policy is that regardless of what level tax is at as a percentage, and it doesn't matter, what we're talking about, what demographics we're talking about, whether we're talking about low income, middle class, or we're talking about upper class, or even 1%, the tax receipts come in at about the same amount, no matter what the percentage is. And some people were asking, well, why is that? Why is it when we tax more, we don't get more? When we tax less, we don't get less? What does that mean? Well, the reason is because when we talk about most of the tax income, first of all, it's a fact that about 33% of all income tax comes from the top 1% of businesses, I think it was. It's either 1% of businesses or 1% of total individual earners. I think it's businesses, though. I think. But either way, that's a huge. 33% from the top 1% of anything. That's massive, and that's because they already are getting a substantial amount of tax, and I think that most business owners will, they'll agree that look, we know that we need to put in a little bit more because of our success, and this country was the country that gave us that success, so it's kind of an obligation for us to give a reasonable amount that will help the rest of the country in terms of our total GDP, and who better to do it than the entrepreneurs of this country. Now, this is directly in opposition to the sort of portrait that gets painted by leftists of the of business owners as, like Scrooge McDuck that is just hoarding his gold and jumping in piles of cash every day. And, that image is so, like everything else from the left, it's so cartoonish and so, the same way that they paint villains. It's like they're all evil, misogynists, racists that sit around in their basements with their other evil geniuses and maniacally laugh at the next racial plot they have on destroying Americans and segregating black people, and it's so childish. There's nothing realistic about any of that, and it's because it's kind of obvious. People don't just want to portray themselves to be. No one wants to portray their ideas or themselves to be evil people. They want to portray themselves to be, except for some edgelords probably online that really are probably more clowns than villains. But that's a different story. But anyway, the reality is that that's just not what you find even amongst dictators in the world. If you were to talk to dictators now. In a lot of cases, these people know that what they're doing is absolutely immoral and wrong, and they shouldn't be doing that. But at the end, in a lot of cases, it's not even for themselves; it's for their children or their families or whatever. They're trying to just stockpile as much money as they can for when they die, so that their family will have, I mean, when you look at the case of even when you look at the case of someone like Joe Biden, it's clear that a lot of it was meant to be passed on to his son and to his family, and essentially that was the whole point of a lot of the accusations during the impeachment inquiry was that look, we don't have to prove that Joe Biden directly benefited from these foreign business relationships as just him directly. If it was meant for the purposes of going directly to a family member, which in this case obviously it was, where he's still getting, infamously, of course, 10% for the big guy, but the majority of it seemed to be for his son, his granddaughter, and his grandchildren in general, aside from the one that he wouldn't claim. They finally have claimed her, but who knows if they're actually getting any kind of, support for that. But, politicians are extremely immoral. But at the same time, even with their direct family, they are going to be very, very much a different person, just like everyone is with their family. So, it's not that anybody's evil. It's not that there's this evil intent. It's selfish, and it's very, very. It leads to very bad results, but it doesn't mean that there's bad intention necessarily, or that he was doing it specifically with the intent to harm anybody. And even when someone does get harmed, sometimes it's a bad call either way. Somebody's going to get harmed, or someone else is going to get harmed, and it could be based on the people in terms of their nationality or their total population size, or whatever it might be. But leaders have hard decisions to make, and I'm not talking about this. I'm not talking about Joe Biden and the impeachment inquiry. I'm just saying that when it comes to decisions that people get angry at a leader for, in many cases it's something that people can't really put themselves into that person's shoes, but they should at least try to understand an alternate perspective. Sometimes there just is none. Sometimes it's just obvious that this was pure greed and obviously nothing more than that. But in other cases, it's way more ambiguous, and I'd say the vast majority of the time, it's much more ambiguous than it is on its face, because you're never gonna. First of all, that person is probably not going to ever talk about this honestly, and if they did, it'd be very difficult to discern what is true and what's false. But if you were to get inside their head and to actually see what motivates them, I would guess most of the time you'd find that they're trying to protect somebody, or they're trying to look after somebody. And now the problem is with some of the more extreme left, and in particular the feminist types, they look at that as an insult. And there is a case to be made in certain instances, like the reason I think the Supreme Court kind of struck down affirmative action was because I watched an interview, well, not an interview, a discussion on Steven Crowder's channel, where he was doing one of the Change My Mind segments, and this time it was about affirmative action. And there was this girl, and it was really sad to see her talk, because she had graduated with a really high GPA. She had gotten into a very very high level school, not like Ivy League school, not like Harvard or Princeton or any of the ridiculous indoctrination centers, but it's still indoctrinating, I'm sure. But at the same time, just a good college, and first person in her family to be able to make it into college, and she had said at one point during the interview, she mentioned that it's like something like, well, sometimes I kind of feel like I don't really deserve it, and it's like, well, why? And it's like, well, because I mean, I didn't really I didn't receive affirmative action, but I did get certain government privileges, or wait, no, she did. Even though her GPA was good, she was aided by affirmative action to ensure she got placed in some kind of camp. So it was a weird, ambiguous situation again, where I can't remember the details, but I do remember that she made the GPA to actually be accepted, regardless of whether or not affirmative action had stepped in. But they did, just to alleviate some of the what would you call it? This is like the scholarship portion of the billing. But the sad part is that, like, essentially her main problem and what she was wrestling with was feeling like she really was truly deserving of being at the school she was at, as opposed to feeling some sense of accomplishment and pride in yourself that you were able to accomplish. Just feel proud of your accomplishment at all, and that's what affirmative action seems to oftentimes sort of cause people to feel, as opposed to grateful, is because you're not doing anything at all other than being of a certain race or a certain minority group to be recognized for these sorts of benefits. And in that case, you're wondering, in the cases where people actually really are self-conscious enough to be like, do I deserve this? Or did I work hard enough? Is somebody more deserving? And in this case, no, absolutely not. She worked really hard, and she did what she needed to do to get in, and she damn well should have some degree of confidence and excitement over her own. It's like, take some pride in your success. Take some pride in the fact that, now, don't get a big head over it, but of course, this is the opposite. This is getting the feeling that you don't deserve something when you should feel every reason that you could possibly measure to say that, yeah, you do deserve this. You perform better than most people do, and not just in your demographic, but amongst all demographics. And that's a reason why, once again, when we're talking about affirmative action, nobody wants to talk about the other end, which is the Asian American population, which has essentially, if you were to get higher than 4.0, just an A GPA, essentially, as your score on, like, SATs, or even as your GPA, then that's not enough for an Asian American, especially female Asian Americans. Female Asian Americans are the group of Americans that have the absolute highest level of standard on them being accepted to a university that uses any of the sort of DEI bullshit that is so common on colleges now, and in terms of what's it called, affirmative action, they have no benefit whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, it hurts Asian Americans, because they say, like, well, then our whole campus would be made of nothing but Asian American people. Okay, so what? What's the problem? Who cares what this is what drives me nuts too. It's like, every Asian American is going to have different perspectives. They're going to have different beliefs. They're going to have different lifestyles. They're going to have different family lives. They're going to have, everyone treats race like a monolith, and it's not by any means. And black people are no exception. There are some incredible, the left hates this, because when you talk about someone like Clarence Thomas, you talk about someone like Larry Elder, you talk about someone like Thomas Sowell, You talk about Dr. Ben Carson. They hate these black Americans. They really do. They hate these black people because not only are they all conservative, which is probably the thing they hate the most, but also they were successful in the United States without the aid of the government behind them, and showed other black people that, look, your race is not going to hold you down if you don't allow it to hold you down, if you don't use it as a crutch, if you don't use it to justify all of your shortcomings, then it won't be a hindrance to you. And not to speak for black people at all. I don't mean to say, but I mean I'm speaking from things that I've seen time and time again said by not just those specific people, but by African American and black students across the country that disagree, or that come from more conservative families, or didn't get sort of raised to be essentially get raised to believe that they're a victim early on, and to treat everybody with skepticism that doesn't sort of kowtow to your particular presence, as if it's some sort of groundbreaking achievement for African Americans, when for decades and decades the idea of a black president was something that everyone looked at as a milestone, that once we get there, it'll be if we can get there. Some people didn't think it would ever happen. But if we can get there, it would be a sign that black people have really overcome all the serious barriers to their success, and to show that they can accomplish anything in this country if they are driven to do it. And that's why Obama was such a great success, and at the same time such a terrible tragedy, because it really was incredible how early on it was such a great feeling of not just electing a president just because he was black, but people really resonated with the message. He's still is an incredible speaker, and he's a fantastic politician, which that part is a double-edged sword. But the day of his inauguration, it was like people, especially older black people in the country who had been here through some of the segregation periods, through Jim Crow laws, and through different attempts for segregation and separate but equal, and all the other ridiculous ways that we had been able to continue justifying racial segregation in the country. Those people had witnessed America at that point, and then they were sitting there witnessing a black American president be inaugurated, and many tears, and it was a powerful moment. And it's unfortunately, and this is not saying anything about his policy. This is not about Democrat or Republican related anything. This is just the sad fact of the matter, and what I believe is the main reason why it sort of flipped and became a different sort of vibe later on, is because there was constant, like, this is going to be something every president's going to have to deal with. They're going to have to deal with the opposition, the other party, scrutinizing their every move and finding some reason to criticize it. And maybe deserved, may not be deserved. There's definitely a combination of both for every president, but sometimes they just make a really bad decision. Just like every president. And it's ultimately, for the longest time, and I've kind of discussed this, but just to kind of put it out all in terms of the start and the end, when during his campaign, and for the first few probably the first year or so, or maybe more even under the Obama administration, time and time again, reporters kept kind of prodding and trying to get a certain type of answer because what they wanted to hear was the opposite of what he was saying. He was being asked that, well, do you think that this is just, white people trying to derail a successful black presidency, or do you think that this has nothing to do with that? And he would consistently say that no, when something went wrong, like, no, I'm the president. The buck stops here. It's my responsibility, and I failed, obviously. But the media did not want that answer. They wanted the answer, because they always want this answer, that I think this is the traditionally white country, or whatever they want to, categorize it as, which, sorry to break it to you, but I mean, there is a reason why there's a majority of this country is made up of white people, and it's not because of racism, and it's not because, it is purely because of the fact that the population never exploded in certain demographics, and here we are. But that's not what's looming in people's heads every time they try to present their point of view. It's like there may be legitimate grievances based on the actual policy and the actual results of the policy that are about nothing at all, except for the president being the one to enact it. And if he was thinking clearly or not, if the decision was well made or not, and if he had taken into account all the factors that would be, like, that's the reason why Operation Fast and Furious, which, just to quickly overview, if you don't know what that was, it was this really strange idea by the administrative branch and certain federal law enforcement agencies like ATF, that they're going to try to track the sale of weapons through Mexico by some sort of like labeling or stamping or traceable numbers that were like serial codes or something, and see like where those weapons were being trafficked after they had left the hands of an American citizen and had gone into the hands of someone that was trying to get a bunch of pretty decently high-powered weaponry, including things like RPGs and really heavy-duty, like war, not like the MR, or excuse me, not the MR, the AR-15 that Democrats label a weapon of war, which is the most ridiculous idea. 223 is not going to be a weapon of war, but anyway, they legitimately wanted to find this out, and they never would have guessed that, the criminal enterprises that are out there are pretty damn smart. I mean, they didn't get to be at the head of a enterprise that is as ruthless and cutthroat and just barbaric if they weren't good at breaking the rules and knowing how and what to do in any scenario where you are potentially doing something that's going to get you in trouble. So turned out that was a really bad idea, and we ended up just giving cartels and other dangerous sort of like guerrilla and militia groups in countries in Southern America and Northern Triangle the ability to buy like this pretty huge stockpile of American weaponry that was just like not at all in any way being something that, well, basically to just summarize, the idea that they were trying to do to find out more about how they trafficked weapons turned into them basically handing the cartels a bunch of weapons. And, of course, everyone, not just the right, but, people on the left as well as voters were all pretty appalled by this idea. And also that they had tried to kind of keep this whole development secret from the population. And so, as they say, the cover-up is worse than the crime, and that was definitely the case in this one. But this was one of the bigger examples of what led to Obama finally caving, and finally just getting into an interview where trying to say something along the lines of that, well, I wouldn't be getting nearly as much heat if I wasn't black, and just the worst kind of messaging you can use in situations like that, where it's already something that is already something harmful to the country. Don't make it harmful to the division. Don't use it to stoke the division in the country and make that a problem again. But that, unfortunately, was exactly what happened, and that's why we ended up with Black Lives Matter. That's why we ended up with the George Floyd riots. That's why we ended up with defund the police. And those are the rippling effects that came out from the sort of inability of Barack Obama to just take responsibility as president of the United States for everything that had happened. And there was no question about it, because, this wasn't like something that was done and not brought to the president and done in his name. It was something that he himself had approved of and signed off on. And so, it was just, and it was really, really sad too, because it seemed like, I think I mentioned this stat before, at that point in time, just around the time when Obama got elected, race relations were at a point where like 92% of Americans had a positive overall view of racial relations in the country, and it was at an all-time high. And it was like, there's not much progress left for us to make, maybe a little bit more, but it seems like race is finally starting to become an issue that no longer is so divisive. And then, fast forward to now, they are almost at the same level as they were in during segregation. It's insane how bad of a blow we've taken to race relations in this country because of the desire to blame one group or another group for the failures of your own your own group that you belong to. But the reality is that everyone is able to make their own decisions, and if you take your time with big decisions and really consider the actual results and what they could be, and are honest and upfront about that you are aware of that going in, people are going to be a lot more receptive to the way that you they're going to view you in a way that's a lot more long term. Maybe not in the short term for some people, but in the long term, going to be a unifying person to be behind. And unfortunately, that was where that whole situation fell short. But then it got even worse, because then when Trump gets in, it's conflated once again by the media that he hates these people, he hates that group of people, and it's because of the way that, and this is all leading somewhere, trust me, but there was this strong reaction to Trump's candidacy in general, and one of the most controversial points, of course, was the wall and immigration. And his point that was obviously becoming something that they recognized was important was that like we're not discriminating against Hispanics, or we're not discriminating against Latin people from becoming Latin Americans or Hispanic Americans. We are rightly doing what every other country on earth does and using the proper steps necessary to defend our own borders, which is why no one demonized legal immigrants from any country or any racial demographic or any faith, any religion, whatever they believed, whatever demographic they belonged to, whatever their country of origin. Once they became an official American citizen, they were an American. It has been talked about a little bit lately on certain news outlets that I watch or podcasts I've seen, but it got me thinking about it, and I was like, that's really true, because this is the only country I know of that, like I've sometimes heard someone say something like, maybe I'm a British something, but it doesn't really seem like they actually are totally in belief of that. It seems more like they're tethered to their original, the original place that they grew up in, instead of the new one that they're in. And so basically, this is the only country where when you come, you're not just Asian who came to America. You're not just a Mexican who came to America. You're not just a Puerto Rican that came to this country. You're a Puerto Rican American. You're a Mexican American. You're a Black American. You're a Japanese American. You're a Chinese American. But you're still all American. And there's not one other country on earth where you get to become a citizen of that country, in the rare instance that they actually let people into the country. And they say that, well, now you're a white Chinese, you're a white Chinaman. That might be a derogatory term, like in The Big Lebowski. Chinaman is not the issue here, but the point is that we're welcoming of anybody who comes in the right way and is willing to look at America favorably after we give them the chance to show us that they can provide some benefit to the country the way that we would expect our own citizens to benefit America. Now, once again, there's nothing racist about that, but that was where once again all the kind of racial tension began to ramp up. And as I've said many times, but I'll repeat again, not even with the Muslim community, because when Trump put in his travel ban, he did not write a ban that banned all. He did not write a ban that excluded all Muslims. He wrote a ban that excluded travel or green card status or even temporary visa status to people from 7 specific countries, all 7 of which are known hotbeds for terrorist organizations, and at the time were all ramping up sort of offensive measures against Western countries, as well as all having a large number of people beginning to migrate north to European countries. And it's just obviously by no means something that was like an easy decision, I'm sure, to make. But as he had said during the time when he made this decision, was that this was being done to make sure that everything necessary to do to protect Americans was being done. this wasn't a block of Muslims as a group to come to America or even to become American citizens. At that time, this was a time that there were seven countries, once again, that were very active, all funded by Iran, all funded to act as some sort of enforcement arm for, in particular, the Muslim Brotherhood in a lot of cases, which is a overarching organization that includes a bunch of, it's like gangs in America where there's one big umbrella that all the gangs fit under, and like Crips is a good example. Crips are, there's the Crips, but then depending on where in America you look, there's different names for the different regional factions of each group of the Crips that you look at. So, and this is similar to any criminal enterprise or even any terrorist organization. They're going to have one main large group, and then under that umbrella, there's going to be several, branches that are based on things like region or other factors that separate them culturally or whatever. And so all this is to go to say that once again, this was not anything anti-Muslim. It was anti-destruction of America, and it was like that. Well, yeah, this is all just white racism and yada yada yada. But the point is that these are all messages that were cooked up by media organizations, and they do what they do. Similarly to Charlottesville, they cut out everything that is favorable and everything that is more nuanced and that explains the true intent and the actual purpose of starting this policy, and they leave that out to make sure that at an appearance there's no possible way you can describe what's happening in this situation other than the president being racist. And it's just not the case, because as we've seen, one thing that was fantastic about this election is that Trump not only got the Jewish Americans to support him, but towards the end of the campaign, Muslim Americans started to endorse him. And I think it was, what was it? Is it Michigan? I think it was Michigan, where or it might have been Wisconsin. I'm not sure. There was that group of Islamic leaders, though, that came up at a Trump rally and fully endorsed Trump, and their reason was because they are some of the Muslim immigrants that are just trying to stop the bloodshed and trying to stop the wars, and they don't condone the Islamic terrorism. They don't condone the wars. They're not happy with Israel for continuing them, but they are more concerned with finally ending the bloodshed and having peace come over the region than anything else. And there are plenty of Muslim people, especially in America, that fully 100% agree with that needing to become the goal of the regions in the area that are continuing to allow groups like Hezbollah and Hamas and even former remnants that are becoming once again powerful amongst the Taliban and anybody affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood and just anyone that falls under known terrorist organizations. They really don't want these people to be just treated like anything but what they truly are, and that is just sick monsters that want to eradicate not just Jewish people, but want to eradicate everyone who's non-Muslim, and in most cases They would do it very painfully and slowly if they could. I mean, they despise other groups and consider them subhuman and want them to die painful deaths. So that's a very long but important reality that people should recognize, is that there's nuance and discussion you can have about everything, and if you only listen to one group of people who obviously make it known that they are going to be less than favorable, especially when evidence has come out. The Charlottesville thing is probably the best example of what you can expect from a group of people when they have no real no real concrete examples, because there are none, that this guy is this racially divisive white supremacist leader that is going to round up all the Hispanics and Black Americans in internment camps and all. I mean, it's just paranoia nonstop, and then when you have the minority group that they're saying is going to be harmed by this, that comes out and says that, no, we don't believe this, we don't think Trump is going to do this, and they just, then they suddenly are no longer in the club either. Ted Cruz spoke on that at one point during a congressional hearing, where despite the fact that he's Hispanic by heritage, according to the Democrats, he is not Hispanic, because he's not a liberal Democrat, because he's a conservative and a Republican. He's not really Hispanic. That's why they hate Larry Elder. That's why they hate especially Clarence Thomas. They despise Clarence Thomas. So being a minority that is against their agenda is one of the worst things it's almost worse than being white in some cases. Like, if almost the two are very close. I think it depends on the period of time. Sometimes there's a bigger reason for them to be angry at general white men in the country, and sometimes there's more strict reason for them to be anti well, anyway, I'm sorry. I think you get the point. So what does this have to do with well, this has to do with the fact that there's one common factor amongst all of this, and that's the media. The media that have controlled messaging for a long time, and the desperation that they are feeling at the moment based on the fact that they're part of a dying form of entertainment. They're not the juggernauts of power that they used to be, and they don't hold the same level of sway and control over the way the American people think about political figures anymore, like in the golden eras of journalism in America, and now are mostly only watched by people who are already loony and are just trying to find people to reaffirm their looniness, which is why they have to gaslight and say that no, it's actually the people who are radicalizing Americans are actually those damn people on X with Elon Musk, and oh yeah, that's right, that's who is the real threat. The people on X, the average American citizens that are on X that are talking about their concern for being able to pay their bills and feed their family, and this administration's inflation they've allowed to grow out of control is really just completely something made up. In fact, the inflation is getting under control, and our economic recovery is going along great, and it's they they have no grasp of reality. Um, their their reasoning they give is almost always like they leave out some sort of key specific detail so that they can present it as if that this, well, really what matters is these factors, and these factors all point to, like, it doesn't matter if the most important factor is taken out, if every other metric says that they're ahead, and you look around and nobody can afford their grocery bill anymore. I think that factor you're leaving out is kind of important, and one of the main ones is inflation, and the problem for inflation is twofold. Number one, it's and I've been talking about this for a while, but it's that the economy under Trump was suddenly just completely like ground down to a screeching halt because first of all, the Keystone XL pipeline, that's one of the major, like, it can almost be a symbol for what the administration was going to do throughout the rest of throughout the rest of the presidency. They were going to cancel pipelines. They were cancel, drilling projects. They were going to cancel fracking, and the production of all, they're still going to produce, but more on that in a second. They're going to cancel all these major projects and focus on this ludicrous concept of transitioning the American market to be all run on electric, green energy powered by wind and solar, and they're all going to do that within like 50 years, and it was just it's anybody that knows anything about energy, and including me a little bit now because I've been listening to so many of these discussions, and they're so fascinating. But even when I think back to early things I learned in elementary school science about carbon dioxide, and how carbon dioxide is actually essentially what you would call a food for plants, because whereas we inhale and we retain the oxygen while exhaling the carbon dioxide. Well, trees kind of have a similar but opposite process. Whereas they intake the carbon dioxide, they release back into the atmosphere oxygen. That is how a lot of plant life is. That's how it lives. And so one way that you could mitigate any kind of carbon excess that was considered detrimental to a particular area is that, well, not to sound like a hippie, but you could actually work on planting some trees. But they don't want to do that. They don't want to do that because they'd rather, and this comes down to lobbying and business, and I won't get into this in detail, but essentially there's a lot of money, especially coming from China, because that's where a lot of this stuff is made, as well as certain African regions where there's also a lot of rare earth minerals that need to be used for the construction of these devices, for whether you're talking about wind turbines or whether you're talking about solar panels. Virtually no manufacturing of, very, very, very little is going on in the United States, and China's what would you call it, firm grasp on that is not going anywhere. So that's why there's these huge costs for all these things, but because people have grown crazy with hysteria about climate change and how climate change is going to kill us all and this and that, there's no reason that you should consider that a valid argument for why you shouldn't be using a traditional combustion engine, which is once again why they wanted this strong push to have electric cars go on the road. Meanwhile, first off, no one really in great numbers was in, like, I mean, I've seen people who own electric cars, and it seems like a nice commodity to have, but as a practical matter, if you're talking about for the daily use of getting back and forth to work and to pick up your kids from school and whatever it is you are doing and you need your car for, if for any reason you are not making every opportunity to switch over to a electric car, then you're just part of the problem if you're not doing that. And people are just like, well, sorry, I guess I'm gonna be part of the problem, because we've got car lot after car lot after car lot that have been trying and failing to purchase or to sell electric cars, and they're just not selling. And then the government gets mad at the dealerships trying to act like they're doing something wrong. It's like, no, people are just not buying them. And so we start there because the largest one of the largest issues of why we stopped being able to bring in such large amounts of money for the federal government and for more people even is because we suddenly stopped all these contracts and all these projects that were planned already and prepared, and now we're losing their contracts. And just like Keystone XL, the other one that comes to mind is Anwar in Alaska, which was discovered to have just these massive areas of oceans of oil and areas for where fracking could be major source of natural gas, and all these projects got canceled. Meanwhile, they're spending all this money on products that no one's buying, so they're not getting any money back on that. And then at the very end, they're realizing, oh no, they're not moving the electric cars, and they're instead they're trying to focus on something that's going to cost more money. And we just weren't ready for that, especially coming out of the pandemic, where, by the way, once again, this was the other part that was really messed up, was that, President Trump, when he was in office, did pass a budget that was about the same level of spending, unfortunately, that you get from Democrats when they're in power. And everyone admits to that, and everyone is disappointed by that. But the truth of the matter is, and I agree, it was short-sighted, and it was not the best idea. Maybe something that you should have kind of either held off on or kind of half committed to at the time. And then I have no idea if that would have worked or not, but something else at the time until you are guaranteed to be able to have a second term. I think he was positive after the successes of his first days in office, where everybody was in total agreement with him. Or I'm sorry, I changed subject. Hold on, let me go back. I think he was certain that after we got through the first 4 years, and we were able to make that presentation at the end of the 4 years to be like, look at all these things we accomplished. And unfortunately, he couldn't, because right when it would be the time to start campaigning for election season, that's when COVID came up. And if there was one thing that drastically really just screwed people's head up so bad, was the response to COVID. And Trump is definitely responsible for some of the blame in that situation, but that's the key word there, is some of the blame. I would even argue by far not anywhere near the number one person who made our approach to the approach to the pandemic they almost wanted him to fail because it was a way to reset people's opinion on him and base it solely on this thing that's terrifying them right now, and people forget that by the end of his first term, and especially when we're getting into Biden's inauguration, by that point, so many industries had been able to come back to life and to kind of move, like, forget all these Trump era policies. We're going to do this and this and this. It didn't matter if Trump had success using those policies. They weren't enough for a lot of the modern Democrats. And so instead of embracing any good idea, they just cherry-picked things that were said that they could take out of context and present as meaning something totally different than what they're actually promising to deliver on. And, it's like it harkens back to the Obama pledge for Obamacare that centered around the concept of, what was the, oh, yeah, so once again, similar to our, what do you call it? I can't think of it. But anyway, it really was a attack vector to suggest, though, that Trump uniquely was responsible for contributing to the complications and bad policy we have up during COVID. We need a new leader, and of course they dutifully responded. But the bigger problem was that the bigger problem was essentially that why am I not? No, the point was, it's not like there was nothing you could point to in the rest of Trump's presidency. Meanwhile, we can promise that we'll do better. We'll be able to take care of people. And this is what people forget, is that Operation Warp Speed happened under Trump. And while, once again, the vaccine was handled incredibly poorly, especially during Biden's administration, Trump's approach of taking a hands-off stance when it came to the states and allowing them the decision, which is what's so interesting as well about Roe v. Wade, once again, is that, not Roe v. Wade, but the Dobbs decision and overturning Roe v. Wade, there was all this talk about how you wouldn't be able to get an abortion in this country ever again. Abortion's going to be outlawed, and it's like, I've heard some stories of women having, over like 15 to 20 abortions, and it's like, don't you think you're not only killing the potential new human life, but you're also doing it in a way that shows you how careless and thoughtless this whole agenda is. So, but it wasn't just on things like this. And this is where I'll play one clip, and then we'll go into the final sort of message for the day. But there's one major reason why inflation, as far as this part of inflation goes, when it comes to the bill side in Congress, which this is where we're going to head next. First was the inflationary cycle based on the change in policy, especially around fossil fuels versus electric energy. The next one is Congress and congressional spending on their yearly budgets and the way the process is handled. So, first of all, before we get into this, I'm going to preface this by saying, if you're not familiar with what's been going on, this has been going on since I think it was the healthcare reform bill that was, it was the healthcare reform bill that was attempted to be passed in the Trump administration's first term, and Nancy Pelosi infamously came up and a reporter had asked, well, what are the details of the bill? And she responded with, well, you'll have to read the bill to find out. And that was not just her stance with reporters, that was a stance with the American people, the members of Congress, and the members of the House, and everybody else that may have been involved in the process of appropriation spending, meaning what money is allocated where in the federal government. And this is where they will run around screaming, all the time. If nothing's passed, then what do you call it? Yeah. So if you're not on board with that, you are you're essentially uncaring about helping to protect and provide for American citizens, and you're going to cause a government shutdown by us to default on our debt, and yada yada. It just was like completely unfair, because once again, you can't know what's in the future, but you do have the ability to discern very easily, without even having to do any research, that you start prioritizing ridiculous ideas over proven ideas to work. There's a damn good chance that you're going to end up with an economy that's in the trash, but it doesn't just end there. It doesn't just end with some bad policies that cost tons of money. It includes, and this is probably one of the worst parts of the dysfunction that's in Congress right now, is that everyone's so focused on headbutting and proving their side right, and attempting to state like everything they're saying is so detrimental to the society at large, and our ability to keep our actual democracy intact, and it's like, no, that's kind of dumb, actually. So no, it's not a good idea. It's not good policy. It's not a good step forward for the United States. It's not a good step forward for any country around the world to act like this is a good sign. But there's also consistently, if you ever heard the term earmarks, there's consistently all these earmarks, which are usually something that a single senator or a handful, like 2, maybe 3 members of the Senate will throw those in, and they don't have to be put in with 24-hour notice to be able to be voted on. Unfortunately, as I was seeing the other day, some people just don't have attention spans that last long enough to be able to hear exactly what's proposed in these sorts of spending packages. Or the other option could be that, no, it couldn't be that Dr. Fauci would lie, is it? Well, it kind of seems like that. But anyway, and not a lot of people were of the mindset to be able to pick through at all the instances where there was some reason to have some concern about this being the best way to spend money. That all, bear in mind too, being technically quote unquote civil servants, it doesn't seem like they serve any cynical man, this is strange. Anyway, they don't accept that concept at all. They instead seem to be what's the best way to describe it? They basically are trying to make the case that well, come on, we are going to you already know what we're going to attempt to do, and we believe the American people want to do that. Well, they do, because you've scared them into a paranoia But outside of that, there's not really much reason why. The reason why, like, you just have parties that are always looking sideways at each other, always trying to make sure that their particular argument or statement is going to be as insulated as possible, only amongst their own party members, and no one there that's going to be raging on the what do you call it? So basically, what is it that are some of these earmarked projects? So these are the ones that senators will put in that are for their own states, and just concepts that are well. One of them, as I was talking about earlier, is the Infinity Gauntlet test. That can you snap your fingers if you're wearing a metal glove? Well, no, you can't. Okay, man, what a shocker. But here's a good, solid list from Rand Paul of things that. Now, there's a reference in here to the Golden Fleece Award. There was a congressman who invented this concept. I think it was in the 70s or the 80s, I think. He might say in this video, he might not. But if he doesn't, kind of overview. I can't remember the name of the senator, but he came up with the idea of every election cycle to get a quote-unquote why am I blanking on that? Well, there was a case that was there's cases that are all over that are fall under this sort of idea that well, if my constituents want it, it's like, well, yeah, your constituents might want it, but do they want it over lower prices for energy? Do they want it over lower prices on groceries and the necessities, rent, housing, things like cars, things like that? I would guess not, but we'll see. You guys can tell me on the other end if you think these are worthwhile expenditures for the federal government to be spending our tax dollars on. So we'll, and this is a fairly long clip, but it's the only one I'm going to play today, so you can just get through this one, and then we'll be, I'll close out the episode with the main message that was basically discussed yesterday. So let me pull this up. This time I know exactly where it is, so there's no worry this time. So okay, so here we go. All right, so this is from I can't remember when this is from. I can't really remember exactly when this is from. It'll probably show up in the episode somewhere, but or in the episode, in the clip somewhere. But anyway, yeah, it's a fairly long clip, but this is a good comprehensive list of some of the. Oh yeah, the Golden Fleece Award. It was the concept was, out of all the stupid pet projects that government spending and tax dollars had gone to, this member of the Senate, I can't remember his name. Rand Paul might mention it in the clip, but if he doesn't, they came up with this idea to highlight the dumbest, most ridiculous point of expenditure on the budget during the last cycle that that would basically be like almost unjustifiable under any circumstance, and most likely is unjustifiable in any stance from like the perspective of you're being a representative for the interests of your state, while you're passing legislation like this. There's you just can't reconcile those two things together. So here's the clip from Rand Paul's floor speech about some areas where there's a pretty good list, and this is not a comprehensive list, but it's a pretty good list of things that the government has spent tax dollars on, and and what kind of results you can expect from those things. So here we go. Let's get. Oh, hang on, no volume. Sorry about that. Okay, let's do that again.
Kentucky.
A group of us chose to filibuster this bill because we think it wastes money. We think it gives money to one of the most wasteful agencies in government, the National Science Foundation. Since the early 1970s and since William Proxmire began giving the Golden Fleece Award, for 50 years there have been a recurrence of waste from the National Science Foundation, from NIH, and from even the State Department. We discussed earlier some of these, and I have a handful of more that I think the American people should know about where their money's going to. So the NIH spent $2 million in research to see if using a hot tub can lower stress. Really? I think we probably could have just agreed to that. But no, we had to spend $2 million to study if you're soaking in a hot tub, whether that helps to relieve your stress.
I don't know why anyone would buy one.
Now, the NIH also spent about $1 million to see if they could help people overcome their fear of dentists. Really? NIH spent almost $7 million of cancer research money to create an automatically flushing smart toilet.
Oh, this one's good.
That's right. $7 million for an automatically flushing toilet. And here's the bonus. The toilet will actually take pictures of your derriere from the inside of the toilet bowl, should you wish to have those for posterity. $7 million for a
Just a second. Why would anybody want that? I have no idea why anyone would want photos taken of their bare ass dropping a deuce in a smart toilet. Your tax dollars at work, people.
Smart toilet. How does this go on and nobody does anything? You know what we do? We flush more money down this smart toilet. We give them more money and nobody bats an eye. This is the problem of government. Nobody denies the waste. Nobody denies the ridiculous projects that are being funded, and yet year in, year out, it continues. We need to reform the process. We need to have a taxpayer advocate on the committee that votes on the projects. We need to have somebody with a grain of salt that is voting on these projects. Somebody who says that studying whether humans will eat ants to curb global warming, whether that's a useful, expenditure of $3 million to study whether or not humans will eat enough ants to keep the globe from warming. This goes on, and the people at home are like, how could this happen? How could you spend money on this? But it happens year in, year out because we never vote for less money.
Well,
it's
this is
always
one
more.
reason.
So
There's another
the
reason, though,
senators
and
here
I'll get
today
into
are
that at the
filibustering
end.
this bill because somebody's got to point out that the waste and abuse of money goes on. The National Science Foundation, the king of wasteful spending, spent $100,000 to teach social scientists how to apply for grants. So it's not bad enough that we're just, handing out money like it, grows on trees, but then we got to teach people how to get more of the free money. There actually was another cache of money that went to Central American countries trying to teach them how to get more of our money. Really? We're actually teaching foreigners how to apply to get grant money from our government that's $28 trillion in the hole. We're annually $1 trillion in the hole. In the last couple of years, we're $3 to $4 trillion because of all these COVID bailouts and all of this crazy government run amok. And at the same time, we're $2-3 trillion in the hole a year. We're sending $100,000 to teach people how to get more grants. The USAID spent $48 million helping disconnected Tunisian youth to not feel like, they are a problem to society, to help them cope with modern society. Well, look, coping's not easy for young people anywhere around the world, but I guarantee $48 million that we don't have, that we have to borrow from China to send to Tunisia, is not a good expenditure of money. Probably helped no one, probably enriched some contractor somewhere.
Yeah.
Somebody steals some off the top. There's always a little skimming operation. It was once estimated that as much as half to 70% of foreign aid was skimmed off the top, either by corrupt dictators in the countries receiving the money or simply by graft throughout the government.
By the way, why do you think people are against sending money to Ukraine and against sending money to, Gaza and stuff like that? You think it's because they really don't care about the people? It's not that. It's this right here. It's the fact that once those pallets of cash show up from the United States, I mean, where do you think they go? Especially in Gaza. You think it goes to relief to the Palestinian people? No, it goes to Hamas, which probably in large part goes a lot of it right back to Iran. So, no, it's not even doing what people are expecting it to do. Sorry, if you want to do that, go hand deliver it to the Palestinian people. Good luck with that. But I mean, you're not going to be able to do that as long as Hezbollah and Hamas and Hezbollah are in control of the areas in the region, because they're going to strong arm it directly from the people as soon as it arrives. That's why I've talked about this before, but that's why you get a plane or a truck coming and bringing this cash into a city, and people jumping on the truck and trying to get into the truck before it gets to the destination, and trying to take as much as they can if they can get in, because they know once that gets there, Hamas is in control. And that's not going to help the people of Gaza or Palestine or anywhere in the region. It's going to help fund more weapons, more rockets, more, that's what it's going to. So you can pat yourselves on the back if you are such a humanitarian, you're going to vote for aid to Gaza, but you're not helping Gaza. So I had to point that out, because it drives me nuts when people talk about that. Do you really think that people, it has nothing to do with their empathy toward that, or not wanting to do something to help? They want to, but doing that's not going to help. So I just had to get that out.
In these countries that we send the money to, often the foreign aid money was going to countries with people who had had dictators for 20, 30, 40 years, and we were giving money to dictators.
Yep.
National Science Foundation spent $4.6 million to study the connection between getting drunk and falling down. Now, you'd think that would be obvious.
Yeah.
You get drunk, you fall down. But no, we had to go ahead and study whether getting drunk and falling down was something that happens. We spent $4 million if you get drunk, will you fall down? This is insane. Not one person, a few of us, but not a majority will stand up and say enough's enough. The NSF needs less money, not more. The NIH spent $36 million to research why stress makes hair turn gray. I'm at the age, I need to know that one. I mean, why does stress make your hair turn gray? Really? Nobody would pay for this. If we got 100 assembled Americans and said, vote on whether or not you should spend $36 million studying why your hair turns gray,
surplus, that would be an interesting thing to see.
Rational, common sense American. And yet this Congress is going to increase the budget of the National Science Foundation by 68%. The National Science Foundation spent $2.5 million to research the effects of daydreaming. I'm not kidding. You can't make this stuff up.
Daydream.
And so what are we going to do? Increase their budget, $29 billion in more money for the National Science Foundation. They ought to be ashamed. One side of the aisle doesn't give a fig how much we're spending, but the other side of the aisle that I reside on the right, pretends to care about the debt, and yet the majority of them will vote for this monstrous bill. The National Science Foundation used $1.5 million to study how to make tomatoes taste better. They spent a lot of money. They spent a lot of time. They wrote up their report. And this is shocking. This is groundbreaking research. They found that if you add sugar to tomatoes, they taste better. You can't make this stuff up, but it goes on and on and on. I'm glad to be joined on the floor by the senator from Utah, and I will reserve the remainder of my time and pass the baton.
So that is a much bigger list of some of the things that, like I said, most people don't know this, and this is basically what's at the heart of my point for the episode today, which was to be centered around the so I went to lunch with my grandma yesterday, and we do this usually once a week, and it's good for her. She has trouble getting around. I've talked about this, and we were talking about the sort of typical issues that we talk about, and since I've been doing the show, we talk about just the show in general, and I talk about how it's being received, and things like audio equipment, and things that are working great, things that aren't, some ideas I have, and yada yada. But every once in a while, when we talk about the subject and we get into political issues, she's very very hesitant when I mention anything about Trump. But I tried to stay away from the issue for the most part yesterday, until I had to. I was talking about Trump's nominees, and that part wasn't so bad. And that's what's so interesting, is that that's not so bad, but you start talking about Trump himself, and then it gets really bad. And once again, I heard the same talking point that she's raised several times, which this is not uncommon. The point was, he wants to get rid of all of our Social Security money, right? Or he wants to lower it. And I shook my head, and this time I came with a point that I had been wanting to raise for a while, though, because I kept forgetting to tell her this, but I'm glad it came up in conversation rather than me bringing it up, because if I just brought it up, I don't know if it would have been as impactful. But I said, well, first of all, as I've said to her before, that's not true. No one in the Republican Party, as a matter of fact, has really said anything about taking people's Social Security away. That was a big jab at Ned Ryan when he was part of the Senate, and essentially it was a jab at his mention of taking a look at all government spending and nothing being off the table. Which, ironically, who else said that about in the 80s? Joe Biden. Or was it in the early 90s? It was either in the 80s or early 90s. Either way, there's this exact same thing. Nothing should be off the table, even Social Security. In this case, this time Medicare as well. But it's not to take Medicare or Social Security away, and it wasn't in either case to give Biden his due as well. The point was that there's a lot of unnecessary spending going on in every government program across the board, and we need to be able to see where there is unnecessary expenditures and where there are things that are just there to get somebody a little kickback who thinks that they deserve more than they're getting. But the overall more important point is that the conservatives have not once ever even hinted, and have consistently had to reject the premise, because it's always in the media. It even was brought up at the State of the Union address, falsely by Biden last time, that conservatives wanted to take Social Security away from people, and senior citizens wanted them to have a cut to their Social Security payments. it's been knocked time and time again by the entire Republican Party. No, that is not what we're attempting to do. But I came with something even more important this time, which was Trump's position on relieving all the financial burdens off of families at the moment. And I mentioned to her that, when he's talking about taxes and his tax reform, there's three major things he wants to do this time around. And one of them is that he wants no tax on Social Security for seniors. And she looked at me like I was crazy. Like, really? No, really? I was like, yeah. He said it several times. There's three places. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security for seniors. And it eventually kind of went around and around where she said, how do you know all this? Where do you hear all this? And I've heard that question before, but then it hit me. It's like, okay, I'll tell you where I heard it. I heard it from watching the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives. I know it's boring. I know it's kind of thing that not everybody would want to sit down and watch every day. But damn, you can really see exactly the kinds of things that you need to see about the United States government's position on just about anything when you watch those and their attitude toward those things when you watch these hearings. It's like the way that they all ganged up on RFK Jr. in the last hearing just because of the fact that his stance against vaccines was not part of their, ridiculous COVID policies, but because he stood up for free speech still, and apparently the Democratic Party doesn't believe in free speech anymore. And just the venom and the attacks and the way that they would accuse him of the most vile, despicable fucking things you can think of, to make a point about nothing more than his stance on vaccines. And why? Well, because they are beholden to Pfizer and Moderna and Big Pharma and all the other places, and even leftists who don't buy the bullshit anymore are realizing this, and they are sickened by it, and they understand why Trump got elected if they didn't outright vote for him themselves. Because, you got to remember that, there's a lot of people going into this election that said, I'm a Democrat, I've been Democrat all my life, I've voted Democrat all my life, but I can't deal with this anymore, I have to vote Trump. And there's a reason, because he was the only one that was talking about this. He was the only one presenting solutions for this that made sense. The guy's a business guy, and to top it off, for all the constant, nonstop pounding away at he's never going to leave the office, he's never going to leave, he's going to be a dictator, he's going to be this and that. Okay, there's no proof of that. There's proof for all this other stuff. He said it. His followers have said it. Supporters have said it. His choices for administration appointments, they've all said the same thing. And you've had, once again, I can't have any better proof than people like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. and Elon Musk and people who have been Democrats their entire life are suddenly behind this man more than anybody else. And that's not what the left wants to talk about. They'll accuse all of them of being right-wingers. They'll accuse all of them of being extremists. They'll accuse them of being, in RFK's case, just despicably call him some kook. And so the other place you see it is in the way that mainstream media will continually misrepresent everything that's said, and they will sidestep it, and they will talk about things that have happened in the past, and they'll talk about things that they cherry-picked, and they'll go back and they'll use the same playbook once again that they used on Charlottesville. They'll show you some of the evidence, and they will remove all the rest of it. They'll remove the fact, like, for example, that he'll be found guilty in court by this judge, and now he's a convicted felon. They don't tell you that it was because they had to bend the law several times, They had to make the jury non-unanimous in what they were accusing him of. Basically, didn't matter what he was found fraudulent for, just that he was found fraudulent of something, which was absolutely unconstitutional. But then, not only all of that, but they had to do that they had to do all of that on top of the fact they had a judge sympathetic to the Democratic Party by massive, notoriously anti-Republican, whose daughter was raising money for at one point the Biden campaign, then the Harris campaign. And, somebody who, albeit had donated just a small amount of money, still had donated money to the Democrat Party. I don't care how much it was. I wasn't going to give any money to Kamala's campaign because I don't believe in Kamala Harris for president. You don't give any amount of money to a campaign unless you, at some level, agree with that candidate. So, I don't really particularly care how much money. Did he donate the same amount or literally anything to the Republican Party? No. Yet you have the front runner and, at that point, I think already, the current Republican nominee for president. You're the judge in his case, and that's your record. And yet you want to use convicted felon like it's some sort of charge that really sticks because he's a convicted felon, and why would you vote for a guy like that? I don't know, maybe because the whole process was rigged from the start, and it was to do nothing but to delegitimize his presidential run, and it didn't work. And they are livid about it. So when you listen, and this is the other part of the problem, because you can listen to what I listen to, and you can listen to Congress, you can listen to the Senate and the House, and you listen to their arguments, the way that they talk, the way that they treat witnesses, the way that they focus on things, the way that they rebut certain points. Do they have a legitimate counterpoint? Most of the time they don't. Most of the time they just revert back to, that's just Fox News talking points. Okay, that's not evidence. But the other side of the coin is, well, what are they watching? And that's the problem when you're talking about, especially, unfortunately, when you're talking about people who are a little bit older. Senior citizens are still kind of, kind of stuck to television and mainstream media by virtue of only being, only appearing on television. That's it. Anyone else who is more typically a consumer of media online is going to feel totally differently. Now, it does kind of matter, who you're paying attention to, but even if you're not paying attention to the strongest voices of either party, even when you're paying attention to just people in the middle, especially in this particular race, it was like there was a certain point where there was a threshold that was crossed, and it's like, okay, this is just ridiculous. And if you ask me, it's probably at the point where Biden was removed from it was bad enough his performance in the primary, but or in the not the primary, the first presidential debate, but it was far worse when they decided, no, we're going to kick him out and we're going to just put Kamala Harris as the candidate without a primary, without any debates, without any discussion, and without her winning over one voter, one delegate, one anything. Nobody voted for her. Nobody did anything. They just, by way of rules of that they wrote down themselves, I guess. I don't know, but whatever the reasoning was, they skirted the whole democratic process to nominate this woman as the next candidate, and yet they had constantly been beating the drums of Trump being anti-democracy for years and years and years and years. And that was the point where I think a lot of people just had enough. And if they hadn't had enough by that point, then, there certainly was things like not answering one single question, no matter where the source was. And then as we got down to the last couple weeks, you had Trump and J.D. Vance go on the Joe Rogan Experience and have 3-hour-long conversations where they talked about everything from policy and personal life, whatever the subject was. Then you have the contrast with Kamala Harris's campaign, and that was, well, we don't want to do this. Well, we don't want it this way. Well, we don't want to come to Texas. Well, we don't want to do the show with, talking about this. Well, we don't want to have, it's just stipulation after stipulation because they know she can't speak. And Joe's whole show, the whole thing with Joe Rogan's podcast, the point of the show is to have a conversation, a natural conversation. And I guess she can't have a natural conversation. Or she's at least concerned enough that she would be too worried that she could not have a natural conversation where things weren't flowing. And my guess is because the amount of lies and the amount of scripted answers and the amount of things she's been told she has to say have piled up to a point where she can't remember any of them anymore unless it's scripted on teleprompter or whatever. That's how phony the whole thing was. So, once again, you have all this going on. You can see it plainly if you watch any social media, but not if you watch only MSNBC, not if you only watch CNN, not if you only watch ABC. Legacy media, broadcast media, that's just television media, and the major news organizations that have been around, bought and paid for by corporations that are globally traded. Sorry, that news is like it's been dead for a long time. Even Fox is not the best source to receive information anymore. Now they might be doing a lot better than most others, because at least there's one thing that sets them apart mainly, and that is the fact that aside from News Nation, which I hadn't really even been aware of what a presence they have on. Oops, sorry about that. On actual television, I've seen them on the internet broadcasting. All the time I see their name up, but I haven't watched TV in God knows how long, so I don't know. But I do know they have actual television programming. So aside from them, Fox News is the only place that will tell you out front, right from right out of the gate, where they stand on issues, where their slants are, where their biases are, and this is how they feel. The problem with the legacy news media, aside from them, is that they try to pass themselves off as legitimate journalists who are unbiased, who have no political slant, who have no agenda. They're just reporting the facts, and that hasn't been true for a long, long time now. So, yet they keep pretending that that's still their position. And it's just, if you have any kind of if you watch them at all, then you're well aware that no, they don't. They don't do that. So, and for the first time ever, what was interesting was that when she heard me finally reference some of these things, she was surprised. And I think more than anything, because I mentioned that, look, Trump is trying to, bring out a tax policy that helps everyone, actually literally helps everyone in the country finally, and is not only catered towards this group or that group. And for the first time ever, she wasn't so angry that she had to shut down the conversation immediately. It was very interesting. It was really interesting to see, but it was really something that finally made me hopeful that, look, as long as you can just hit the right subject with the right tone and the right argument about something that, because I know my grandmother is on a fixed income, Social Security benefits, and my grandpa is pretty highly into stock trades, and so he's still invested in some businesses, and in that same by the same token, he suggested a few for my grandmother to invest in, and she still makes some money from her investments there, but not a lot, and essentially So they have very fixed income, and so the idea of losing Social Security, I understand it's frightening, but that's what mainstream media knows as well, and that's why they do what they do. So, bottom line, when you have all your information coming from a place that is openly, blatantly, and just so incredibly over the top obvious in their hatred for this man, and I mean, but no better evidence than how long they covered the aftermath of the assassination attempt, and that hasn't been brought up again by anyone except for certain guests. It's clear what their position is, and it's clear that you're not getting honest information about what he believes. And so if your source for him doing the same thing they accused freaking Ned Ryan of, and being willing to throw Granny off a cliff and get rid of her Social Security, you're just not getting accurate information. I can't explain it any way better than that. So, unfortunately, if there's anything you can do to watch some other source, just watch some other source. Watch any other source. Get your grandkids or your whoever to help you out to put on one show on YouTube, or one show on Rumble, or one show on anything, and just listen to that. Or better yet, just watch C-SPAN. Just watch C-SPAN for a little bit and look at the budget that's proposed by Democrats now that they're still in the majority in the Senate. God knows what they're going to try and pull for the what's it called, appropriations bills, but yeah, it's gonna be ugly. It's gonna be ugly, and conservatives are gonna have to really dig their feet in the sand and be like, no, we're not budging on some of these things. And one of the things we're not budging on is one of these ridiculous omnibus spending bills that are 1,500 pages long and have God knows what in it. We can't pass another one of those. We can't keep piling on the debt. We can't do that. So anyway, that's my fun experience for the day, and that will do it for me for the week. I will be off again tomorrow because it's Sunday, so you won't be seeing me again until Monday. But thank you guys. I'll just say one last thing before I go off. The week was incredible this week. I was blown away to see the turnout for some of these episodes. I can't thank you guys enough. It's been a hell of a lot of fun. It's been awesome to see the turnout, and I can't wait to see how next week goes, because if it's any indication of what's to come, I'm very much looking forward to seeing what this show is capable of as we go forward. So once again, thank you guys so much for always showing up and for being here to check out the show. And even if you've given it a chance and didn't, as I say, wasn't for you, wasn't interested, thank you at least for giving it a shot. I still appreciate that very much. So with that being said, thank you guys a ton. I will see you guys next week. Until then, have a fantastic weekend, and take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.
Now, I can't read it. There's no words on it.
Okay. Sure.
There's no words there. To play us out. What does that mean? To play us out. What is...